Everyone's building nuclear power plants now. Everyone's going to need uranium, and somehow you don't have a market for it. Like you have there's some ETPs, but they don't allow creation and redemption, so they don't really track the price. There's some futures that don't trade, and then there's an OTC market where you have to trade in millions of dollars at a time.
All right, Frederick Munawa with Bitcoin.com. I've got Arthur Breitman, the co-founder of Tezos.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, I've got so much to ask you. Like I said, we were just talking before the cameras turned on. Yeah. I first heard about Tezos 2017 when you're new and you're proposing Tezos as a self-amending ledger at the time. This was the time when there was the block.
It still is a self-amending ledger. You know, we just had the upgrade to Rio. So the upgrades have been named after cities.
Okay.
So we started with Athens, Babylon, Carthage, and so we're at Rio. So it's been 18 upgrade and 18 decentralized upgrade, over-the-air upgrade without a hard fork, where the community just votes on like what the upgrade should be. And that it's been since 2018 when the chain launched.
Oh, that's awesome. So to people who don't know about Tezos, or to someone like me who's still stuck in 2018-ish, can you give me a brief overview? I saw that you guys are liquid proof of stake, and I was like, okay, what's liquid proof of stake? So maybe we can get into the architecture and all that. And
you know, we pioneered a lot of the proof of stake. There were some proof of stake experiments before Tezos and ideas. I think we're the first one that launched with actual like proof of stake at scale, with something at stake where you get slashing. Like that was the first one to actually do this.
Right.
And yeah, initially we had this model called liquid proof of stake, where the idea was your funds stay liquid, you delegate them to a baker, which was the block producers, and then they create blocks. We actually so since last year, we're actually moving in a different direction. So there's still liquid proof of stake, but now you're incentivized to stake directly. So, you know, a lot of people, today they might say like, oh, I'm staking on Tezos. No. You're delegating. So you should check out staking. So in staking, you put your funds at risk with the baker directly, but more rewards. And so that has been part of a move called adaptive issuance, which is instead of having a fixed amount of reward every year in the network, the amount of reward is right-sized to ensure that there's just enough stake to secure the network and no more. So that's yes, liquid proof of stake initially, but like you said, it's a self-amending ledger and it keeps evolving. And so we had a major evolution in the past year in this direction. So now we went from like 8% of the funds on chain that was staked and 60% that were delegated to now around 25% of the funds on chain are now directly staked.
Okay, awesome. And how would you explain self-amending ledger to somebody who doesn't know what a self-amending ledger is?
Yeah, so like regarding like ledgers or like blockchains, they have a set of rules, a set of immutable rules. And then at one point, people were launching blockchain and saying like, well, here's what it is, and that's just going to never change because we can't change it.
Right.
And then other people were like, no. The developers will change it and everyone will just install the upgrade. And like, neither of the systems work. You don't want to not be able to ever change anything.
Right.
But you also don't want to have your developers willy-nilly telling you like, here's a new version. You know, it's like, oh, you're free to upgrade it. You don't have to upgrade it. Okay, but everyone else is doing it. So if you don't, you're going to be lost on a fork where no one is.
Right.
So you have really no freedom here. So what we have instead is a self-amending ledger. There's immutable rules, but the rules contain provisions to change themselves. And every political system has that. Every political system has rules by which the rules can change. Right. And that's what we have on Tezos. And that's really, I would say, a unique proposal. A lot other people have tried to copy. They have some variants of governance. No one does it like we do.
Wow. So that's very interesting. So how would you know about the op return debate that's going on in Bitcoin right now?
I mean,
and this is kind of like what you were explaining when in 2018 when Tezos launched. They were
debating op return in 2013. They were debating it. It's like the thing is endless debates for a decade now. And Bitcoin's unwillingness to upgrade, Ethereum's slowness in upgrading, and Bitcoin's unwillingness to upgrade has been giving lunch to everyone else in the space. Everything could have been dominated by Bitcoin, but they just don't want any change. They don't want any new technology on the chain.
Right. It's something that's being debated right now. So let's say that you guys had a similar opcode that was causing issues or being debated upon, how would that change and how would you guys change that in Tezos?
I think it's a matter of culture. So in general, there's been like not that much discussion or controversy around technical features.
Okay.
Because I would say anyone who's like interested in Tezos, like part of the ride is like it's a chain that keeps getting better. And so in general, like people are for the chain getting better. When you always like will find debate is anything that has to do with like the token supply or issuance or change in rewards, that actually will trigger a lot of discussion. It's something people like feel strongly about. Right. Technology in general, also there's a track record of like being ahead of the curve and making good technological choices. So that in general has been welcomed by most of the community. More discussions anytime, you know, like when the Tezos chain changed to this new proof of stake model, for example, with reward, I was touching the reward, lots of discussions on that topic. Right. So it varies. But I don't think for something like up return, there's something that would be controversial on Tezos. It's a community that's like largely pro-innovation.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Like, you know, every chain has its own culture.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin has its own thing going on. We'll see how that turns out. So, so you guys are smart contract platform. So you're not like Bitcoin, you're Turing complete, you've got smart contracts, you've got L2s. So do you see yourself as like one of the Ethereum killers in the space?
You know, the term Ethereum killer was made up by Ethereum maximalists. I don't think anyone ever really marketed themselves as an Ethereum killer. What happened is like, you know, we launched like Tezos and we're like, hey, here's the way it's great. And people say like, well, is it better than Ethereum? And like, well, you know, we think so. Here's why we think it's better.
Right.
And then Ethereum community says like, oh, they want to be an Ethereum killer. Well, we'll show them. And like, no, you just made that up. You know, I don't care about killing Ethereum. I just want Tezos to be the biggest and the best.
Right.
I don't care what happens to Ethereum. That's not my problem.
Right. Well, I hear you. You know, it's always interesting because it was, you know, Cardano, and then you know, I forget the old one. There was another one. I'm forgetting it now.
The people accused of like marketing themselves as Ethereum killer. I mean, I haven't reviewed like every piece of communication that they did, but I think it was like largely an accusation levied by Ethereum maximalists more than anything. Right. But you've had the EOS and you had the Cardano.
EOS, that's the one I was thinking about.
And you have all of that. Yeah.
Like in the early days. So you guys have smart contracts and you have that full programming capability.
Yeah.
And I was looking at Tezos. It looks like you're focused on you've got an arts focus, and then you've got a DeFi focus. Yeah. And then you've got, you know, this
gaming, our DeFi and gaming. I would say the three big pillars. And in DeFi, I think like with the focus on, you know, I always say the point of finance is to finance something.
Right.
If you're just financing more finance, there's no point. So in DeFi, we try to have a focus on well-read assets and other real applications. And recently, as you may see in my T-shirt, Uranium.io launched, and it's letting you buy Uranium on Tezos.
Yeah, let's get into that. Like, so why Uranium? How do you tokenize Uranium? Why Uranium, and how's it going?
Well, why Uranium? Because it's awesome, and it's like a super important commodity. Everyone's building nuclear power plants now. Everyone's going to need uranium, and somehow you don't have a market for it. Like you have there's some ETPs, but they don't allow creation and redemption, so they don't really track the price. There's some futures that don't trade. And then there's an OTC market where you have to trade in millions of dollars at a time. So like super important commodities that everyone has heard about, real strong interest for it, no markets. So that means opportunity.
Oh, that's interesting. First time for me, and I was looking at it, and I was thinking to myself, okay, so there's lots of things that we can tokenize. We've heard about tokenizing like private equity, right? Because those are liquid assets.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with tokenizing a liquid asset. I think there's value in it. The problem is like it's not necessarily the thing you want to start with. Yeah. Because blockchains are great for like trading, and so people assume like, oh, that will bring liquidity, but not necessarily. With something like uranium, there's not that much liquidity in the markets, but there's a potential for it because it's one huge asset class. Right. You know, you can have millions and millions of people interested in it. It's, you know, there's not that many elements in the world, right? You have, you know, maybe like 100 or so. So how many people are going to like, all of them are capable of considering a lot of liquidity. Whereas if you tokenize a real estate project, that's great. Maybe you lower your onboarding costs, maybe you tap into new investors, like why not? But they are like millions and millions and millions of real estate projects in the world. So it's going to be diluted. So I would focus on like big markets that are obvious and yet do not exist yet.
Oh, and what other what other like chains are doing this? I mean,
No
if
one
somebody
else is
can do
doing
it on
it.
Tezos, I assume that somebody would go on Ethereum and do something similar.
Well, there's
or,
people who want to do it, right? I know there's some people who want to do this on Solana. And the last time they tried to do it, they did a mine offtake. And then when that didn't work, they turned it into like, oh, this Uranium thing lets you mutate your NFT collection. So that was very unserious. So yeah, some people are trying to do this on another chain, but they're not doing it. And you know, right now, if you want to do it, it's the only game in town, Uranium.io.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so you talked about the gaming is what is the biggest use case for Tezos right now? So we know that, for example, Solana, which you just mentioned, is like meme coins. Ethereum tends to be more on the DeFi side, and liquid staking and so forth. So what's Tezos' niche, I guess?
I mean, the thing we're known for right now is like the art community. I would say like from a total economic size, it's small, but like from an influence side and visibility side, it's huge. And you know, because art is a tastemaker, and we have this fantastic community of artists and collectors on the Tezos blockchain.
What are some companies, some projects that are, and I take it these are NFTs or is...
Yeah, they're NFTs. They're NFTs.
Okay.
But those the artists are creating on different platforms. Some of the most popular ones are Object.com, Teya Art, AKSwap, and there's more. So it's a lovely community.
And then besides Uranium, I know Uranium is kind of like the main thing that you've been focused on. Like you just had a talk about Uranium.
It's one of the things, I love having Uranium because I used to give a lot of talks about the technology on Tezos, and it can be like, I'm super passionate about technology. And like when we get really in the weeds, I love those talks. But for a broader audience, sometimes it's just like not a match, like not everyone is interested in like the fine details of like, what are the benefits of optimistic rollup compared to like, validated rollups. I'm super interested in that. With Uranium, it's something that everyone instantly relates to. Like everyone has heard about nuclear power. Everyone has heard about uranium. So that's why I bring it up. It's not the only, there's a lot going on Tezos. We have some really awesome game launching on it, on chain soon. There's, fantastic thing happening in the art community. So it goes way beyond that. But I'm excited about it personally. So I bring it up a lot.
And Kathleen. So what does Kathleen do at the foundation? Because I know you guys used to tweet a lot together.
Kathleen is not a part of it. Kathleen will be the first to tell you she's not a part. She has nothing to do with the Tezos Foundation. She's not a part of the Tezos Foundation.
She's not?
Has never been a part of the Tezos Foundation.
Oh, she's never been. Okay, okay.
No, she's been. She likes to describe herself as a yen of the network, trying to facilitate introduction, meeting people. She's also been a great voice for the project at various conferences.
So tell me about your journey. I know your background is more on the finance side of things. So tell me how you got into crypto, to be like your origin story, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think of myself mostly as like a math guy. I like mathematics. So I work in finance. I was a quant. I work at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. I did market making, commodities, ETFs. So that's a thing I know. But I also worked in robotics. So like for about a year and a half, I was working at Waymo. I was working on left turns because left turn is harder than a right turn in the US. Now I live in London, it's different. It's right turn is harder than left turn, but so yeah, I've done a lot of things, and I got into crypto because one, there's a political project around it that I subscribe to, which is about empowering individuals and protecting them from governments, which is something I'm fairly passionate about. I'm an individualist. I believe in freedom.
So what's is that? How do you compare individualist and libertarian? What would you say?
I think individualist is more. I would describe myself as a libertarian, but I would say individualist is a bit more specific, and there's overlap. But I would say it's not exactly the same saying. Although there's considerable overlap between the two sayings. But I prefer individualists. I like to think of people as people, like as individuals. That's what I like to focus on. There's also like a math component to it that's super interesting. Like I was in cryptography since high school, so that was super interesting. And like I also had a huge interest in finance and the theory of money and banking. So, like for me, it was a nerd trap as soon as I heard about Bitcoin.
Awesome. And so I know that you're very knowledgeable about the space. You've got a very technical mind. And right now it looks like we're on the cusp of something big. It looks like crypto is either mainstream already, or we're just about to cross that line with the mainstream with all the regulatory approvals and Trump kind of championing crypto. What are you most excited about in terms of things that are coming up in the crypto space.
So you're right. Like there's been massive headwinds with the administration in the past 4 years that basically like tried to kill the industry very actively. And I don't think the government needs to do anything for crypto. All it needs to do is like not actively try to like wage an illegal war against it.
Right.
Even that is like huge. So like once you remove that headwinds, a lot is possible. You mentioned meme coins earlier. I think meme coins were a reaction to like, well, if everything is banned, like you have to make the thing completely useless and like completely devoid of any substance. And like the safest legal strategy was to just basically like do something that has no value, take the money and run. That is what specifically US regulators were trying to encourage. But which is nonsense. So now that that's not the case, I think we see more interesting thing. I think that a lot of interesting primitives have been created in DeFi. The prospect of having instant settlements, permissionless innovation, very fast innovation, global markets, 24/7 markets, that's huge. Even some innovations which are really like specific to crypto, like perp markets, are super interesting. But so far, it's been a circular economy, right? You have DeFi serve more DeFi use cases. Can we put DeFi and actually finance something with it? And this is when, like having real assets compose with DeFi and interact with it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right? I think all along we've been doing crypto for crypto. It's almost like you build something for something that's building something for, it's almost, like
to some extent,
infinite circle.
There's not that many industry in crypto. The biggest industry in crypto is selling a token.
Yeah.
And then when you think of DeFi, it's like, it might look like an industry, but like the DeFi industry is in service of that other industry, which is like people selling tokens. You want to sell a token, you don't want to give 10% of your supply to CZ, so that it lists it on Binance. All right, DeFi. That was the use proof of DeFi. You get to launch your token without having to like be extorted by centralized exchange for like a huge amount of money. I kid, it's not extortion, but like it's super, super expensive for people. Like there's a huge, like people don't know this. Like if you're not like involved in one or two, people don't know this, but they should know this. A lot of this industry runs on selling access. Whether you're talking to exchanges, to custodians, to middleware vendors, they don't actually make their fee, like most of their money from their customers. They make most of their money from integration fees. That's the thing that people don't know about exchange, about the world. Anyways,
interesting.
So like selling token, biggest business. Stablecoin are a real business. Like people are really using stablecoin for remittance payment, for saving. So like that's real. I would say prediction markets. That's another thing that's real. And art, smaller economically, but like that's very real. Like these are real artists, and people tend to conflate it when they think of NFTs. They think of like a lot of the PFP collection, but like the PFP collection of 2021, they have far more in common with meme coins than they have with art NFT. Like there was not a strong art component around it. Like real art NFTs, like they're here, they exist. They're on Tezos. Check them out because it's just awesome. And if you just want to look at it, go on object.com. If you can support the artists and like collect their work, I encourage you to do that because we have amazing creators there.
Is this digital art, or do they have like real world paintings that are somehow tokenized? Like what's?
It's both. It's mostly digital, but some of them also do physical pieces.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting take, and that's becoming popular. I've talked to quite a few people who have like NFT museums. We saw a couple of those yesterday. So it looks like it's persistent, right? It's something that people want.
Absolutely. And I would say like, there's a lot of gems which have been forgotten, like from 2021, 2022, and like there's bargain hunting that can happen because this is not going away. So like art as NFT, digital art is absolutely not going away.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, especially now that a lot of image generation is being commoditized, like real art's made by human and digitized in the early days of the NFT movement. That's going to be exceptional, I think.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I'm seeing it. Like for me, it took a long time for me to actually, I guess, appreciate how much people are into NFTs and art.
Yeah.
When CryptoKitties came out in 2017, I was like, this is not going to go far. But it's like you said, it's persistent.
They were ahead of the curve. They were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, they were. They were a little bit early, right? So they kind of burnt out, but it looks like it's persisting. So it'll be interesting to see. Anything that caught your eye at Consensus? I know it's early first day, and you just had a talk, but if you see anything that you thought, wow, this is a really great use case or company or something like that?
Yeah, I was by the Etherlink booth, and Etherlink is a L2 on top of Tezos. And I was like, wow, we have Uranium. I'm kidding. No, I go to a lot of conferences, so it's a lot of the same cases around, a lot of the same stands. So I don't think anything really like specifically stood out yet. But
maybe it'll happen over the next couple of days.
I have to go over. I have to go around the floor and see what's happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Nice to finally meet you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Arthur Breitman, co-founder of Tezos. Thank you for listening. Bitcoin.com.